That's how you get change in society. You can't just get change with one story. So you kind of need investigative journalism, which is... It's all storytelling. We really respond to stories. It's in our DNA. If I said to you, 64% of ACC victims break their ankle falling off, you've lost me already. The statistics get lost on people. It's the stories. When I say, Jane was only 6 years old and she fell off such and such, now you're interested in Jane because it's a story. The actual day that we separated, I was thinking, okay, I'm just going to go to the pub and buy a packet of cigarettes as well. So I used to smoke way back in the day. But I went for a run instead. I was that close to drinking again, but I didn't. I thought I was a big sort of TV guy. You go into the wānanga and you'd be at the bottom because you were a poor speaker. Are you going to do the mihi whakatau? Are you going to start with a tau parapara? What are you going to do? You're at the bottom. And I think that's a pretty good place to be.
Can people in this day and age still trust mainstream media? Mandate. Hi everyone, if you are enjoying the content and the guests that are on the podcast and you're wanting more, then please do us a favor. If you can just press the subscribe button, that would be an amazing help for us. But also, just want to mention an amazing organization called AOK, who sponsors the Mandate podcast. And so they are an organization that runs suicide prevention, intervention, and wellbeing programs. And so AOK stands for Acts of Kindness. And so you didn't need me to tell you about the alarmingly high rates of suicide in our nation, especially amongst our rangatahi, our young people, even our tane, our men. And so if you're wanting to stand in the gap and you want to be well trained and well equipped to have these courageous life supporting conversations, then please check them out, aok.nz. If you're a business, a company or a collective, or even as an individual, check them out, www.aok.nz. You could very well be that one person to help save a life. Welcome to Mandate, where we navigate fresh perspectives and nothing is off the table. Tonight's guest is from Tāmaki Makaurau, but originally from the Garden City, from Otutahi in Christchurch. The man is one of New Zealand's top journalists, and so you would recognise him on shows like Agenda with Q&A, also 60 Minutes. The man was also, prior to that, was a newspaper journalist. The man was also a political editor as well on TVNZ, and also on the Sunday Star Times as well. And so, just recently the man just has decided to go on a different path in terms of investigative journalism. But even throwing it into the mix, the man's an author as well for the book which is called The Drinking Game. And so it has his own show. He's the host of 30 With, which is the man himself. Please put your hands together for Guyon Espiner! Oh, brother, thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thanks for that introduction. I feel like I've have to enter the boxing ring. So.
Mate, it's an absolute privilege, Guy. And obviously, we watch you back, obviously throughout the years. You've been doing this for 20 odd years now.
Yeah.
And so we could obviously, where do we start? And so I guess we can start the ball rolling in terms of obviously your background in journalism. But just I have two questions, Guy, because investigative journalism, what does that entail? That's one. And then the second one is, what's kind of taking you down this path or down this route in terms of investigative journalism?
Yeah, I guess investigative journalism is where you're being able to be taken out of the news cycle. So you're taken out of the things that are just happening today and scrambling to get that story together today. And you're in a position where you can take several weeks or months to dig into something big and see how it works. I mean, when I first took this investigative role at Radio New Zealand, the first thing I looked at was Pharmac. And I thought, how does this drug buying agency work? Who wins, who loses, how much money's spent, who decides who lives and dies, how does the thing work? And so you might dig into that and read all their annual reports, and you'll file Official Information Act requests, and you'll talk to different people, and you'll gather all this information together, and then you'll start trying to bring it out into the public through different stories. And that might just be the beginning. Then you might publish one and you get emails or tips from sources from there, and then you start digging and often these things can go on for a number of years. You'll hit a rich seam and you'll start plugging away at it, and more will chip away. And they're the sort of projects where you can make real change. You're very really going to create change in society with one story. People think about Watergate or something, the big Nixon Watergate scandal. That was 70 or 80 stories stories on page 17 of the Washington Post, Woodward and Bernstein just chipping away at this thing. That's how you get change in society. You can't just get change with one story. So you kind of need investigative journalism, which is, as I say, pulled out of the general news cycle, and you need a news organisation and some bosses who are going to back you and give you that time, because it's expensive. You haven't got, what's your story today? We haven't got one. You got to wait for 6 weeks. So it does take time, and so I'm very grateful for RNZ because we're funded well enough to be able to do that, and we do have the scope to do that. But that's essentially what investigative journalism is. And you asked why I sort of went down that track. Well, I've done a lot of presenting over the years, both in television, and then I did from 2014 to 2019, I hosted Morning Report, which is the morning show on RNZ, the breakfast show. And I did that for 5 years, did 1,000 shows, getting up at sort of 3:30 in the morning or something. And I thought, look, I've had enough of this. I want to go back and be a reporter again. Because I think in journalism in New Zealand, where you promote people to be presenters and then they never want to leave the presenting job. They just want to do that. I want to be the presenter. So I want my name on the billboard. And I think it's a bit of a shame when sometimes some of the greybeards should be going back and actually using their skills to be knocking on doors and doing the reporting. So I wanted to do that. And but I found it quite rewarding doing that in investigative journalism.
Wow, mate. Man, I can tell you just off the bat, man, you seem very passionate in terms of what you do in terms of journalism. And I guess we can always talk about journalism until the cows come home, but in terms of behind the scenes, because what is and who is, and I can guarantee people who are watching, and the viewers and the listeners are probably wondering, okay, this Guyon Espiner, that he's the journalist. But who is the man behind the journalism? Who is the individual? Who's actual guy without the journalism?
Well, that's a pretty good question. That's a good question, and it's also quite a confronting question to me, because I think, to be honest with you guys and honest with myself, I've probably wound up too much of my personality and identity in my work. I feel so. You've struck on a pretty good question there. And it is a big part of my identity. And for people listening to this, that's both a privilege and a bit of a curse. Isn't it great to find that thing in your life where, you find, what's that old saying, that you find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life, because, and now I kind of feel a bit like that. I love journalism so much. So that's the good bit. The bad bit, I suppose, is I'm so wound up in it that I struggle to answer that question. Who is Guyon Espiner without the journalism? And that is a bit worrying at times. I remember feeling deeply conflicted and a bit, confronted during the COVID lockdowns. I mean, remember that back in March 2020, and I thought, what am I going to do? If I can't leave the house and can't do my journalism, who am I going to be? And so I found that a bit confronting. But look, I'll wear that. But look, I've got heaps of other aspects to my life. I love long distance running. I love music. I play the guitar a bit. I love going to gigs. I love my mates. I love art. I love going to the movies and all that sort of stuff. I love hanging out with my daughter. I think I've got a pretty rich life, but I do wonder sometimes about whether I'm someone who has put too many eggs in the one basket, and maybe that's why I still sort of try so hard to keep sort of reinventing myself in journalism and just keeping it fresh, because it's been a few years now, and they haven't quite got sick of me yet, or maybe they have and they haven't told me. You always get the ask at some point, don't you? But who knows?
But you must be doing something right, because hey, obviously quite sad what's happening with all other broadcasters in terms of TVNZ and TV News and News Hub, all that kind of stuff, and even Fair Go. And so what is it? You talked about reinventing yourself. And so what does it mean for you to reinvent yourself, but also how do you reinvent yourself and be relevant in this day and age?
Yeah, that's the challenge. I think it's about putting myself in a place which is a little bit scary and going, what haven't I done? And I did that. So I did 10 years on newspapers, and then I went straight from newspapers to television. And I tell you what, that's pretty scary because you haven't even done any of the voice stuff, and so you've been a newspaper reporter, and if you've ever listen to newspaper reporters ask questions and stuff. I mean, it's just a very different thing, right? You can be the scribbler. We used to call them scribblers, so you're doing things very different from what we're doing, where you're using your voice, or television, where you're using those presentational skills. So I sort of jumped into TV. Mark Sainsbury from TVNZ was a political editor at the time. He said, why don't you come and give it a crack? And I did. And that was something frightening. And then I went from television into radio, and I found that really hard because radio, you only got your voice, and there's so much real estate to cover, with only your voice. You've got none of the body language stuff. Like, you're giving me signals now. I can look at your face, look at your eyes, you're giving me encouragement, and you can do that to a viewer. But when you're only using your voice, that's what I didn't realise, that I found radio harder than TV for that reason, because you've only got your voice and you've got none of that other stuff. So, last year I thought, well, I've always wanted to do a book, so I did that book, The Drinking Game, so that was new and frightening. So just try something new and scary. But I suppose the safe bit for me is it's all within journalism, right? So yeah, it's TV, radio, books, newspapers. So yeah, it's within the same rohi, if you like, but trying something new and scary within that, I suppose. That'd be my advice for reinventing yourself. But I reckon you've got to do that quite a bit, because you get bored with yourself and people get bored listening to you. You guys are kicking me out. I've already asked him 3 questions.
Never. I love listening to you, guys. Every day. Every time.
At the moment.
And so just thinking about, going back to, because for those, and I'm one of them that doesn't have an intimate knowledge of how journalism works. And I love the breakdown about investigative journalism. So I'm curious about things like funding, like how that kind of works. And then are there times where, like, is there ever a truth that's like, maybe this is better unseen? I don't know. I've just watched too many movies, but where if you're investigating something as deep as it sounds, like, are there times where you uncover something where it's like, holy crap, like, should this be reported on? Is there ever that kind of question, or is it just whatever the truth is, that should be out there?
Pretty much the latter, yeah. Doing our investigative journalism, and I know other journalists who work in that field too, we really, really want to get a big story out. So you'd very rarely, I've never seen a journalist who was sitting on something that they just didn't want to publish. Sometimes you can't, because there are legal constraints, and you can think of many of those. Some of those are in law, any family court stuff, or sometimes there are name suppression things from courts and all that sort of stuff. So there are things that you're not allowed to report, but yeah, you're always trying to dig for that deep truth. And finding any way that you can to get that truth out, because that's what really drives you. You don't see many people going into it for the money. There's better ways to get rich. Usually people are doing that sort of work are driven by a passion for getting the truth out, or for social justice, or for just getting to the bottom of something. So you won't see people sitting on stuff that because they don't think it should be out there.
Oh, cool. And so just thinking about like the different drivers in terms of things like social justice, and there are better ways to make money. So what drives you to want to investigate?
Yeah, just curiosity, or when I see injustice, and I see something and I go, that's just not right. Why do we do it that way? And the answer will come back, well, that's the way we've always done it, but that's not good enough. So you start digging into it. So that's always driven me a bit in journalism, and right from the beginning, I think.
Oh, cool. And are there sort of topics or things that you haven't investigated yet that you would love to get stuck into?
Oh yeah, there's always another story around the corner. At the moment, I like taking different tacks and looking at the different aspects of journalism. At the moment, I'm back doing an interview show, 30, which is a 30-minute interview show. What I love about journalism is there are so many different aspects. I mean, that's so different from investigative journalism, but it's all storytelling. You know, and we really respond to stories. It's in our DNA. I mean, and you have the experience in your life. You know, if I said to you, 64% of ACC victims broke their ankle falling off, you've lost me already. You know, so the statistics get lost on people. It's the stories. When I say, Jane was only 6 years old and she fell off such and such. Now you're interested in Jane because it's a story. And so you find that whole narrative arc in journalism as one of the things that really draws audiences in. And I don't think that doesn't only relate to written or told stories. It also relates to interviews. If you watch a really good interview with a person, it's a story too. It's not just a bunch of questions. It's an actual arc of a story, like where they came from, and you're injecting the little bits of history along the way. So I think that's something you can always get better at. And what I love about journalism is that you can apply that to so many different things, you know, long sort of magazine features, shorter, punchier news stories, you know, long interviews, confrontational political interviews with people like, you know, Matua Peters or Jones, you know, or David Seymour. And you can have your confrontational stuff, and then you can have your more, you know, searching sort of stuff. So there's just different registers, you know, there's different tones, a bit like music in that sense. I told you I was going to rave on about journalism.
Hey, I love it. Yeah. Oh, mate, it's interesting. It is, because you talk about storytelling, and it's just, I'm sitting here with Jay and Brad with you, and it's like you're telling a story. I'm like, I'm just so intrigued. Like, just keep talking. Whereas other people, they talk, but you just have this, I don't know, maybe there's this aura about you when you're sharing all this expression and so forth. Guy,
energy,
the passion, the energy, the passion, yeah. And you're real passionate about what you do in terms of journalism. But I need to ask, because that's a good question from Jay, because has there been a time in terms of investigative journalism, and you're trying to cover a story, trying to figure out a story or find out a story, that you've found yourself going down a rabbit hole and think, oh my gosh, I'm losing myself? Has there ever been an instance like that? Yeah, totally. And it involved a podcast we did on the SIS, the Security Intelligence Service, you know, the spooks, the spies. And this mate of mine, when I was getting to know him, and his mum and dad had been spooks, had been spies for the SIS back in the day. And his dad had told him before he died that he did a mission with MI6 out of Britain to steal the Warsaw Pact codes from the Czech embassy in the mid-1980s in Wellington. And he said that his dad had told him this, and he'd never told anyone. We were playing pool in Ponsonby at the time, and I said to him, mate, that's a hell of a yarn. I'd love to do that as a story. And he said, I can't, we can't do it. But then he came back to me about 6 months later and said, yeah, let's do it. So we made a podcast called The Service, and you know, it's a good listen, the two of us, and we sought to prove that the SIS did break into the Czech embassy and nick the Warsaw Pact codes. And I tell you what, trying to investigate something like that, trying to find out something they really didn't want you to know, was pretty interesting. And there was a whole sort of smoke and mirrors campaign around it, and at some point you didn't know whether you were being played or what was kind of happening. So the Hall of Mirrors, they used to call it. You know, when you go into those fun fairs or something with your kids, and there's that weird mirror, you know that? Yeah. And then you're kind of like, am I getting played here? Are they playing me? That was time where I felt, you know, that I was a few feet down the rabbit hole. But we had a lot of fun doing it. Wow. All right. It's amazing, all these KGB is gonna.
Yeah. They were worried about reprisals because that was part of the Soviet bloc, and the service, the SIS, they call themselves the service, which is why we called the podcast that. They were worried about, because these guys got long memories. Yeah, I mean, it's the FSB nowadays, isn't it? But they got long memories, and there was some concern that there might be some reprisals at pay. Nothing happened like that, but it was pretty. It was a pretty interesting project.
Wow.
Yeah,
because I imagine not everyone wants things investigated, so there must be times where there are obstacles, sometimes deliberately so. But does for a profession where you're fact finding, does intuition play a part in terms of like you get a feeling or an inkling? Yeah,
totally. It's a really good question too. Yeah, I think a lot of it is. Instinct. You get a feeling that something's not right. And you touched on it before. Like, there's this great old saying that I love that that news is something that someone somewhere doesn't want you to know, and all the rest is advertising. And it's kind of true. Like, and so if you get a sense of like, that they're really shutting up shop about this, you're like, why would that be? There's got to be more to it. So if you want to get a journalist interested, just tell them that there's only one line here, or we're blocking this off, or this report, we're not going to release this report, and then you're like, well, why not? That's the one you want, right? So there's a bit of that in it. There's a bit of that, yeah.
But you must question that, though, don't you, Guyon? Like, if there's like red tape, like, oh, why not? What's up with that?
Well, that's right. That's when your interest is piqued. You want the report. You want the secret report, don't you?
Yeah, no, exactly,
that's what you want.
Because I just wanted to ask you this as well, because obviously mainstream media, people, and you hear it now, and you know what I'm talking about. People are like, oh, I don't trust mainstream media, whatever is on the news, whatever they're reporting, and journalists. What are your thoughts on that? And can people in this day and age still trust mainstream media in terms of shifting their narrative as opposed to, I don't trust mainstream media at all?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and it's a really worrying thing, especially for someone like me who's spent their career in journalism. I think the short answer is yes, you still can trust the mainstream media. Journalists in mainstream media are not as frightening as you'd think. They're just ordinary people going to work professionally, trying to write stories without. They don't have agendas at play, and largely they're pretty professional. So yes, you can trust the mainstream media. I would say though that trust in media is falling, and worryingly so. The most recent survey I saw was the trust levels had dropped to about 30-odd%. So about 1 in 3 people trust the media, which is pretty bad. And I think, if you were running any product, right, if you were making, amplifiers or whatever you were doing, and people were saying they didn't trust your products, you should look at yourself. And so I think we need to look at ourselves. So I think we need to take some responsibility for that. We can't just say, oh, you're all morons. Of course you can trust us. We have to show it. And we're talking a little bit about my show, and I didn't come here to spruik my show, but the 30, what we'd say, and the whole gist of the thing, the whole kaupapa of it is, this is a 30-minute uncut interview. What you see is what you get. We don't cut it. And that was what I wanted to do. It's a 30-minute uncut interview. So I'm saying to people, we haven't manipulated this at all. And that's part of the trust thing. It's a tiny little thing, okay? But I think we need to show our workings more. It's great to be able to talk about journalism, what we do. I think we need to do a better job of doing that, because why would people know how our industry works? If you were to come in and see what we do at RNZ, at Radio New Zealand, you will see a whole lot of incredibly hardworking, rigorous people fact-checking every goddamn thing. There are so many. The defamation law in New Zealand is so strong. You just can't say anything about people and just put it out there. You're going to get sued. And you've got the Broadcasting Standards Authority and your own ethics. And there are really high standards. And the difficulty you've got is you've got those kind of professional organisations like Radio New Zealand and the Herald and others who have a certain set of standards they have to uphold. But then everyone has got basically a printing press and a television station in their hand, haven't they now? Everyone has. So you can mass your broadcast to the world. And so and I think the problem with this trust thing is that people aren't differentiating between what their mates shared with them on Telegram or Facebook or something and what the New York Times, which has 1,200 journalists or something, professionals who are really rigorous professionals. You know, you wouldn't put the All Blacks on the same level as some club rugby team, but this is what's happening, you know, that people aren't distinguishing between people who are spending their lives and their professions with really rigorous fact-checking versus some dude who just put something out on his Insta account. And that's the difficulty. And I think you've got to go back, and we're probably going to have to go back and either teach this stuff in schools, and or us in the media are going to have to do a better job of showing our workings and saying, hey, this is what we do and this is how it works, because we do need to rebuild that trust. Because if we can't, like there's four of us sitting here now, if we were trying to have a conversation about how to solve child poverty, for example, we might have different ways to get there, but we've got to agree first on what the problem is, the key facts, how many are in poverty, where they are. So we have to have a collective set, an agreed set of facts to then move on from. So I've got no agenda about how you think we should get there, but we have to agree on the basics. Otherwise, we can't have a conversation. And we're heading into a world, and we've got one in America already, where, you know, you name an issue, whether it's transgender, whether it's mental health, bang, and you just immediately go to your political positions. I'm on the left, you're on the right, and we can't talk about it because we just think the other person's evil. And that is no way to run a society. Democracies fall in that sort of environment. So it is incredibly important. It's not just about, oh, you don't trust me anymore, so I feel aggrieved. It's we need, in a robust democracy, to have a proper conversation about hard issues. And journalism has been the way that we've done that. And so it is pretty important. But, yeah, and sorry to rave on it, but, yeah, I think we do have a responsibility. We've got to grab that trust back. You know, we really do.
Oh, well said. And I can guarantee you, if someone had said that earlier, or similar to what you just said, I think a lot of people would be open to that. And I think a lot of people would be maybe in question or have second thoughts in terms of trusting social, mainstream media. And so the way you put it, it's not nicely put, and it is about kind of getting that trust back and kind of being able to, like, hey, there's different standards, but also coming together, because you're right, there's a lot of differences out there, whether you're left or right or in the middle. And if you can bring it back to that core focus of these are the principles and these are the values that we uphold as journalists, then maybe that you'll get more people coming back to the mainstream media and believing and trusting in the work that you guys do. But
yeah.
well said, Guy. Appreciate that, man. Awesome.
Yeah, just thinking about things like trust, and so the role of social media. I think that, and I'm coming from someone who's sort of gone on that bandwagon and now just like, I don't really follow any media, social media or not. But I think there must be something there about, like, you know, you had mentioned that comparison between the All Blacks and club rugby. And there's something about the roughness of, like, the looks of something being authentic and rough. Like, you know, it's truthful if it's someone that's, you know, it's happening in the moment and it's rough. And there's something about journalism that I think of now where it can be so polished because it, you know, it has to meet a certain quality and criteria that by the time it reaches, you know, the mainstream, that people can be like, oh, how many, you know, who's gone over this and what's the underlying, or like, what are they trying to get here? What are they advertising, or what's the underlying benefit for, you know, the organization or anything like that? So I don't know, just my thoughts on, you know, social media and seeing news is like, you assume that the rougher it looks and the more direct, if it's like a person streaming, talking about something, you know, their experiences or something that's happened, that comes across as more truthful compared to a story that's gone through journalists and editors and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know if that's something that has been portrayed on purpose, if that's a narrative. Like, just hearing about this, I'm like, who benefits from people not trusting mainstream media? And there was something there about, I don't know, this thought came to mind about marketing and, the narrative arc, and you'd mentioned about a story and the rest being marketing. And I think sometimes, myself included, is that a lot of people don't realize how much of the things they read on the internet is marketed towards something. They're pushing you towards something, whether it's disagreeing with people or arguing in the comments or something like that. So I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking aloud there.
Yeah. I mean, you've touched on a number of really interesting points. But just to pick up on your last one with social media, that's exactly how it works. And those algorithms are designed to keep your eyes on the feed for as long as possible. And they've worked out that the way to do that is to have really hyper-partisan content. In other words, extreme stuff that will provoke argument. And because that keeps people on watching the car crash again and again and again. Watch the next reel. And once you've handed over responsibility to an algorithm whose only service is to provoke extremes of argument and antagonism, then you're in a pretty dark space. Mental health-wise, you're in a dark space. You're in a dark space when you're trying to have conversations and conciliatory stuff to find a solution, and so that's kind of the difference between someone who sets out to really unpack and explain to people how the world works, and a social media company who's just employed an AI algorithm to try and build as many fights as possible on the comments. And that's why I do, and I won't give up on journalism for that, because I think it's got a really, really important role when done well. But I'm not saying that we've got all the answers, and I'm not saying that we don't deserve some of the shit that we've got, and that we have lost trust, and some of that is our fault. You talked interestingly about the polish too, and I think there's a bit of truth in that, especially in television. And I did 8 years at TVNZ and a couple of years at TV3, and I was there still when what I called the shoulder pads era of journalism, when you had those looks, and you did that, there's a billboard, and you had to, and they always stand like this, and it's like, and you did the steely eye thing, and it was all that, and they used to, I didn't do this, but they used to back cut the questions too, which I didn't like. Do you know what I mean? So you'd do the interview with someone with one camera, and then you go back to the office and you'd switch it around, and then you'd do your questions, which I didn't think was honest. And we don't do that. Again, coming back to 30, we don't cut it. And I just think that's really, really important. I'm not saying that you can't edit anything. I'm not saying that. But I do think with television especially, because it's showbiz, that, we probably, when I say we, the journalism industry, probably got a bit carried away in television with making it look as slick as possible. And then when people got more media savvy, they were like, oh, I know what's happening behind the curtain. It's a bit like a magic show, eh? It's a bit like a magic show, isn't it, when you think about it? It's like once you know how the trick's done, then you don't trust anything, because you're like, oh, they're just doing, it's like it's like an auto cue. So you're looking at the guy and you think he's just talking to you, but it's an auto cue. And once you know, well, what else is going on there? And I think there's a bit of that. All of these things I think are legitimate, and people we need to lift the curtain a bit and say, hey, this is how it works. And I think we do need to do that to gain trust back. But I think you make some really good points.
Oh, cool.
Good question on that. With you said they would back cut. Could they not just set up a multicam? Just set up a different camera?
Yeah, they could have. And look, nowadays you do, eh? And I don't know how many cameras you got on this. You got 4 or 5. You got three. You got little bits and pieces. It's great.
You got CCTV up there.
But yeah, back in the day with they didn't have that as much, and so they'd back cut the questions. But that's important because the question's the exact question is really important, isn't it? If I've said, can we afford tax cuts, and the politician has said whatever, well, and then you back cut the question and it's slightly different, or even the tone's different, that matters. And I never liked that and didn't do it. So that's a small example, but I just think you got to be really careful once you start going down that road of slightly manipulating something. That's a slippery slope to go on, I think. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool, Guyon. You mentioned obviously social media algorithm, and you mentioned also about not giving up on journalism. And so obviously social media is rampant, and the decline of people not watching the news anymore. And so what is your viewpoint on the future of journalism? And do you see it kind of, obviously you talk about reinventing yourself. So what do you see in terms of, is journalism going to be withstanding? Is it still going to be there, or is it going to be obsolete, so to speak?
It could go the way of the fax machine in the waterbed. And that's my fear. I'd like to be able to say that it will always survive, but I think it's up for grabs, and I think we need to fight for it, because you've got a perfect storm at the moment. You've got social media, you've got a business model that's entirely broken. We can't monetize it. It used to be the relationship used to be, well, you have to sit through the ads and the advertisers will pay for the journalists to go to Ukraine or go to Parliament and report on this. And that was the relationship, right? The newspapers used to call it the rivers of gold. So you'd be at the Greymouth Star and the local furniture shop would take an ad and they'd pay you $700 and they'd be able to create the revenue to fund the journalism. That business model is utterly broken, and no one has been able to figure out how to monetize it really properly, which is why you're seeing all these guys fall over now. So you've got a broken business model. You've got an utter fragmentation. You've had this vase and you've dropped it on the ground and there's 600 pieces on the ground. And so you and I, we could all talk about what we saw for news last night or movies or programs. If we went back to even, 1987, we would have all watched TV1 or TV3. We would have all watched the movie that was on down the road. We've all watched the drama that was on this or something that was on the radio. We had a collective experience of what was going on in the world. Nowadays, you've been watching something on Neon, I've been watching it on Disney, he's been getting a Telegram feed from what's been going on. And so the fragmentation is just so great that there's no real sort of collective experience of what's happened. So you've got that, you've got an economy which is frankly, in the toilet at the moment, that is shuttering lights in media places. And you layer on top of that the AI revolution, which is coming down the road, man, and that is pretty scary. You can already, there are already media organisations in New Zealand who are using AI to generate generate news. They're doing business briefs with AI, and so that's only in its infancy. So we got some big challenges. We really do.
Man, it is quite scary. It's quite worrisome for you, for journalists in general. And so, is there light at the end of the tunnel?
I think there is, and a lot of it. We were talking about trust before. I think that's really important. You look at someone like John Campbell or someone, a face, a presence that you know the whakapapa, the legacy of what he's done, and you can look at him and go, yeah, I know you and I trust you. I think if John looks down the barrel at you, probably trust what he's saying, and there are many other journalists like that, but I just give that as an example because brand's important, and brand's important in cars. The All Blacks brand is important, and you that goes back to trust, and that's what you need to. You can lose it pretty easy, but that's what you've built up, and I think that sort of thing where you and trust the person and the brand around it is really going to be really important in a world where there's 50 different choices, and that's what it is, isn't it? Like you go in and buy a light bulb nowadays in the supermarket, and there's 70 bloody lights. What am I going to do? So it's like, which is the brand that I trust? Which is the face that I trust? So I think that is one of the ways out of it, and we keep coming back to that, don't we? Trust. And that's it. That's a really human thing. And at the end, isn't it? It's me telling you a story. you got to trust it. You can't unpack all of that immediately. You're like, do you trust that person? Well, how many times has he been right and how many times has he been wrong? So yeah, I think a lot of it does come back to trust. Awesome. I think that's the way out, all the way through.
Awesome guy. And obviously with journalism, and you do the interviews as well. And so obviously we can touch on 30 with Guyon Espiner. And so you've had some amazing guests on. David Seymour, David Letele. And so thus far, who has been the guest that you've like, wow, I've learned something, I've really gauged something with this individual and been quite compelling?
Oh, David Letele was, I just think he's extraordinary. I challenge anyone to come from a background like that and then to come out of that. I just think it's extraordinary. And that's why I really listen to him when he's talking about, will this policy on gangs work? Will these boot camps work? Someone with that sort of lived experience, I just think is amazing what he's been through and where he's come out the other end to be helping people. I find the modern stress. I grew up, I'm a doctor's son, I grew up on a good side of town, and I find life hard. And I look at a guy like that and think, shit, man, I would not have come out of that. So I really look at a guy like that and think, man, that's impressive, I was really impressed with him, actually, and I found him a really interesting interview. But the different types of interviews. I mean, Seymour's challenging, and I like
watch that one.
Having a battle of wits with a guy like that, he's a hard one to wrestle down, isn't he? Peter's is always a nightmare. Oh, God. So, yeah, there's different types of interviews. But, yeah, David Letele, I just thought he's a pretty extraordinary guy, really. And I thought it was a pretty rewarding interview. And he really opened up too, which was great, and really sort of, laid it all pretty bare. I thought it was awesome.
Because what's the mindset, Guy, when you go into interviews and with certain people, certain guests, what's the mindset? Do you kind of like, okay, now this guy has to be this certain person on the day, or with the guest? Do I have to kind of be probing the questions? Do I ask the hard questions, or do I kind of just be relaxed? Well, how do you go into each interview?
Yeah, it is a bit like boxing or sport in that how am I going to play this? And you do what I'm sure the sports guys do. You look at the old tapes of how they play, and you go, how am I going to start slow and then come out with a hammer blow, or how am I going to play this? What's my strategy going to be? And so we think a lot about that. That's what I love about it. It's what I love about interviews, especially with politicians, because you've listened to how they've answered the questions. They've got their talking points. What am I going to do if he just rolls out his talking points? And you got to have your strategy to try to knock them off that train track that they just want to go down. And so I love that. Bit about it. But then a Dave Letele or a film director or someone, that's a totally different thing. That's a totally different type of interview. With politicians, I always think that the metaphor with politicians, I always think it's like running rats down a corridor, and there's these doors coming off the corridor. You got to close every one of those side doors and run the rat straight down the corridor, because he's going to take any door that's left open. And you listen to it when you're configuring the question, right? You've got to go, on the 17th of July 2004, you said, quote, I will have interest rates at 2% by the end of the first quarter. How have you failed to do that? Or whatever it is. So you've got to be really precise, It's a completely different thing to interviewing what I call non-combatants. I have combatants and non-combatants, a bit like a military, Politicians are combatants, or bank CEOs, or anyone who's accountable is a combatant to me, right? And so I want precision for the questions there. And on the non-combatants, your Dave Letele or your, artist guy or sports, you're asking far more open questions to try to draw them out. whereas the politicians, you're squeezing them down and running them out the corridor. So, yeah, I mean, that's all. It's fun, right? And yeah, you take it seriously. It might sound a bit geeky, but it's no different from what, say, the sports. If you're doing a boxing, if you're doing a boxing match, you're going to be watching every video of the guy. Look, and your coach is going to be going, look what his footwork does. Third round, he's always this, and that's what we do. We go, this is how he answers these questions. This is, and so you're really, you're gaming it.
Man, and I can imagine some of these guys, when you ask those hard questions, they're kind of like backpedaling, backtracking.
Well, what they do is they want to pose their own question.
Yeah. That's what they do. Hey, I've got asking a question with another question. Yeah, you're right. But has there ever been a time where you find you've been stumped by whether it was a politician or whoever it is? And you go, oh my gosh, you got me, man.
I'm sure they'd say that. Peters has had a lot of points victories over me. Clark was pretty tough. If Clark didn't, Helen Clark, sorry, if she'd be one for really long answers. But then if you asked her a question she didn't like, she'd just be like, no. And she'd just give you the death stare, and it was quite frightening, especially on live TV, because if you've asked several questions and then someone just gives you a one-word answer, you're like, what's your next question? So that sort of, so they've got their own games and stuff. But yeah, you can get stumped, but that's all part of the fun, isn't it?
Awesome.
All part of the challenge.
That's cool, man.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. It seems like there's a psychology to it, to interviewing people. Yeah,
big time. Yeah, I remember Hone Harawera. He'd if you were sitting a bit closer to me, I'd do it because you've got your Crocs on. I remember interviewing on Q&A live, and we're just about to go, and they're like, 7 seconds to you guys, 6, and then he just put his foot out and stand on your toe.
What was that about, Guy?
I don't know. He's got his. He was just trying to get one up on you. Stand on your toe. Like, so yeah, Horny. He's good. He's a good interview too.
Well, which one out of all of them? Which one, like in terms of the politicians that you've kind of come across and you've asked these hard questions? You've like, wow, this person is he knows what they're talking about, and they've changed your viewpoint on them.
Yeah, a few of them. I mean, even Seymour. He give you surprising answers, which I think is always a challenge as an interviewer. But Michael Cullen, the late Sir Michael Cullen, he was an incredibly bright guy, intimidatingly bright, I found, so you had to bring your game. Your top game to interview him, because he's incredibly intelligent, a really smart guy. But yeah, I mean, politicians are all different. But yeah, it's I love the political interview. It's a special strand of the bow.
Man, it's just so cool. You get to interview all these amazing people. Going on, but obviously we can talk about journalism till the cows come home. But your book. Because obviously you're author and you're still that space in journalism. The drinking game. Why the drinking game? What's up with that?
Yeah. So I stopped drinking in mid 2019, so nearly 5 years ago. I was a classic Kiwi kid. From about 14, we'd go and get drunk probably every weekend. And then as I got older, the drinking would just continued. Like many of my mates and many New Zealanders listening to this would be the same, I'd have a couple of alcohol-free nights a week, but then from about Wednesday through to Saturday, I'd be on the terps, pretty heavily, and especially in media, man, and the politicians and stuff and the pressure, we were big drinkers, and that just continued. And I used to have blackouts and stuff. I never did anything terrible, or didn't do the sort of cartoon alcoholic thing, but I definitely had a problem with drinking, and I was always way too frightened to give it away because I didn't know how I would socialise. It was such a big part of my life. It had been a part of my life at 14 when I met girls at the ice skating rink in Christchurch. It had been a part of my life meeting my mates. It had been a big part of my life with sport, with my music that I played. And drinking's one of those things that every occasion, right? someone has a baby, you drink, someone dies, you drink, there's a wedding, you drink, someone gets divorced and they come around and commiserate and you get drunk. So it was kind of with every occasion. So it was a massive part of my life. And I just got just sick of myself. I got sick of the shame of having drunk too much and not being able to remember what happened. And I just got sick of it. And one morning I just woke up after it was a dinner party or something, and I had too much red wine. I couldn't quite, it was all a bit blurry from the night before. And I just went, nah, that's it. And I just stopped drinking that Sunday morning and haven't had a drop since. And when you stop drinking, you realise, or I did, how Aotearoa is just awash with booze, It just really hits you that every occasion is around alcohol, and you really sort of see it in a different light. And so I thought, I gave it a while because I didn't want to be one of these guys who started banging on at everyone. And I don't preach, and I don't, it's, you do your own thing, hoia tō waka, you do your own thing. That's all cool. I don't have any issues with it at all. I still love going to pubs and gigs, and I have beer and wine in the house when mates come over, so I don't have any issue with it. But it did really make me realise how we're swimming in the stuff. And so I did a doco called Proof, which is still on YouTube, and it's a free watch. It was called Proof, and I did that doco, screened on TVNZ in 2021, and pretty much the next day, Allen and Unwin, the publishers, rang me up and said, would you do a book based on the same sort of kaupapa? And I thought, yeah, I would. So I wrote The Drinking Game, and it came out last year, and it's part memoir, so part my own experience, but it's part journalism. It's about how the alcohol industry works. You were talking about marketing before, how the lobbying works, how the marketing works, how the advertising works, how all this industry is really focused on saying basically you can't have mates without alcohol. You look at the Spates ads at the moment, it's all about mateship. And I don't know about you guys, but I found it really weird and hard to make male friends after I stopped drinking. I'm good at it now, but it's real hard because I go to you, if I go to you, we should catch up for a beer, man, and that's an easy start. Then there's no awkwardness. We go to the pub, have a beer, any awkwardness drops away, and it's all, But you try and do that without alcohol in New Zealand, and it's quite hard, because you say to a guy, do you want to go to the movies? Is that weird, or is that, because it's just, that's the way, someone of my, I'm Gen X, born in 1970, so I do the maths. That wasn't the way we rolled. I just wanted to explore all that sort of stuff. So The Drinking Game is part memoir, part history. So it goes through because there's no alcohol before the Europeans came. So that's pretty interesting too. So it goes into a little bit of that, and so part history and part the experience with the media and stuff, because alcohol played a massive role in Parliament and politics, when I spent 15 years in the press gallery at Parliament, and so I saw a lot of drinking there, and they're the ones who make the laws about how alcohol is regulated, so it's all pretty interesting. So that was the big project, and put that out last year, and it was cool to have cool to get it out.
Hey, good on you, mate. I can imagine you would have got a lot of flack in terms of, I don't know if you had, in terms of those alcohol companies and those brandings, all you're pretty much exposing us in terms of the culture and the drinking culture in New Zealand, and it can be quite detrimental in terms of the culture. And like you said, as men, as guys, hey, let's go for a drink, let's just catch up. We don't go, okay, let's just get together, let's talk vulnerable, let's talk about our issues and our emotions. It's not like that.
I think you've really hit on that, yeah. And because when I was growing up, it was a measure of your manliness, like how much you could drink. And it still is. I mean, I heard Winston Peters say to Chris Hipkins the other day, and it was quite funny, but it's quite telling. He said, Chris Hipkins, he'd get drunk on a wine biscuit. Okay, so yeah, it's a good line, but it's that sort of mentality that you are less of a man than me because I can drink more poison than you. I mean, that still exists, obviously, in New Zealand. And it massively existed when I was growing up. I think it's changing, but the idea that we should prove who we are as men by trying to drink this, this substance, I mean, what sort of mentality is that? And that idea that they're pushing that you can't have mates and can't open up without getting drunk. I mean, where does that leave us? That's, we're better than that. And so that was kind of some of the stuff I wanted to get out there, because I want, as I say, I'm happy with people drinking and, you know, do what you like. It's all good. But I want people to know that you can have a great life without alcohol, and you can do all those cool things, have good mates and be honest and, you know, share your feelings. You don't need to get drunk to do that. And I think my mate Paddy Gower did the same. Actually, he had very similar journey to me in politics, media, you know, smashing it out, getting really drunk, realised what he was doing, pulled back, and he did a doco around the same sort of time as me, and did that, which was really cool. So I love hearing, if you've got a bit of a platform, and you can use it for that, then I think that's cool.
Oh, awesome, mate! Awesome.
Do you think there's a responsibility of people that have a platform to do good and to share a particular message if they are in a position to?
I think so, to a degree. And, I did that to some degree with Te Reo Māori on RNZ as well back in 2017 when it wasn't heard much in the mainstream media, and I got a lot of flack for that. And I was trying to teach my daughter at the time, and I thought, well, I'll share what I've got because I've got the mic. So if you want to beat me off, then fine. But when the red light's on, it's mine. And so I did a bit of that, and with the alcohol thing there too. Yeah, I think you've got to be a bit careful, eh? You don't want to piss people off and preach and stuff, and I think you can abuse that. So I do think you've got to be careful, and you've got to stick to, I don't know, sometimes you see actors doing it, don't you? And if you talk way outside your lane and your competence, then I think you can run into trouble. But I think if you do it carefully and you pick a couple of things, and then you should use that position, eh? You know? There's no point saying, I'm privileged and getting all sort of hand-wringing about it. Well, use your privilege. I am actually privileged. I've come from a good background, you know, but there's no point bashing yourself up about it. That doesn't help anyone, you know. I hear people say, I'm privileged, so I'm not going to go to the wānanga and do the reo class or something. Well, why don't you use your privilege and actually help some people, you know? So there's no point denying it. I think if you've got a platform and you can judiciously pick a few things that are going to make a difference, then go for it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And just speaking on making that transition from having alcohol as like a social connector, you know, what are some of the things that you do now in terms of self-care? You briefly mentioned things like art and running, but what are some things that you do to self-care?
Yeah, running is the main one for me. I've been a distance runner for about 20 years now. I've run a lot of marathons, a couple of ultras, that sort of thing, you know. And I'm in a zone where when I run, I'm in a zone. I run for my head, not my heart. You know, I run for a mental health thing, really. And that's when I zone out, and I go over my problems when I run. You know, I fix stuff. And just being out there, just the moving. And Dave Letelier was talking about that too. Whatever that connection, I don't know what the science is, but between just moving and thinking, it really, really does work and help. So that would be my main self-care thing. I'm not bad at ringing mates and playing pool. I like playing pool. Like the Ponsonby Pool Hall. It's a great little spot there. We're funny men, eh? Like, we find it hard just to sit down and talk. I think women are better at that. We need to be doing something. Well, we're not talking, we're playing pool. But actually, we're shit at pool. It's the talking, really, that we're doing. And we both know that. But you know, so we need to be doing something, you know. That's time I'll take to do that. And I'm better at that now, I think, you know. And it's a bit scarier without booze, but it's all real. You know, your emotions are real. So I like the rawness of it without booze, because you blur, like, you know, it works. It is what it says on the tin, eh? That's why people use it, because it does work in the short term to blunt off the awkwardness and, but, you know, when you strip that away, it's pretty rewarding when you have the, you know, good proper conversations, good proper friendships. It's all real emotion stuff. I think that's pretty rewarding. But yeah, care like that. Yeah, I mean, that'd be the main things, I suppose. Could probably do a bit more in that space. I'm fairly old school, I suppose. I've not been a person to go and have therapy and stuff like that. A lot of people, I've never really done that, and maybe I should have. I'm a little old school like that. I'm not saying people shouldn't at all, but yeah, I'm more one for sort of having a yarn with my mates, probably. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Awesome.
And mental health. You mentioned mental health and mental well-being. And so, because of the lot of the work that you do and the journalism and then the stories you're investigating, and it can be quite draining. Guyon, has there ever been an instance or a time where you felt like, mate, I'm just not in a good headspace, not a good frame of mind. I'm just going down a spiral. Has there ever been an instance like that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think. Working in the press gallery at Parliament, especially when I was political editor at TVNZ, and they were in the days in the 2000s, 2006 to 2011, mass audiences. You'd be doing the election debates with 1 million people watching, and it was live. It's really scary. It's just really frightening, the pressure to do that, and you're doing it every night, and you're live every night, and that takes a big toll on you, and you've very rarely get time to put your head up. And I think that's, and the booze was a big part of that, So you'd finish you'd finish your live cross, take your earpiece out, and you'd be in the pub at, 5 minutes past 6, because that's all you wanted to do, because it was so intense, man. You'd be doing it right from the morning, building up your packages, and you'd be looking after other people's stories and stuff as well. And the politicians are right, because everyone watched TV1 back then, pretty much, and the politicians would always be, they wanted to know what TV1 said. So just the pressure of that, and then you cut loose with booze. Incredibly unhealthy environment, really unhealthy. I hope it's changed now. I don't know. I haven't set foot in the press gallery for a long time, but I hope it's different.
Oh, good, man. Good on you, mate. Appreciate that. You also mentioned te reo, and so obviously your wife, tangata whenua, and your daughter's been. You mentioned she's been learning te reo as well. How much of te reo has kind of imprinted on you in terms of the learning and the culture, and how much have you embraced, and what kind of richness have you garnered from learning te reo?
Yeah, it's a great question. Lots. It's had a big effect on my life. I started learning in about 2017 so that I could put my daughter into a position where she would flourish at school, and she learns 100% in te reo Māori now, and it's amazing. She's a bilingual kid at 10, so that's awesome. But for me, in my own journey, that meant language is a real window into a culture. And so I've learned so much and been able to participate in a way that without that I wouldn't have been able to do, going to a marae or tangi or an event where you can actually understand a good whack of not everything that's being said. That's a real connection. But just the thrill of running into someone in the street and having a conversation in te reo Māori is just really cool. I walk away from that just buzzing. It's just really, really amazing. So I think and also you just, things start to make more sense. Like, I grew up in Christchurch, and, in the 70s, Christchurch, it's pretty white. It's pretty white now. I used to see it in the 70s. And so we had the Waimakariri River, and we called it the Waimak. So it was the Waimak. So I didn't even think about this word. And then once you start learning why is water and Makariri is cold, and so it's cold. So you start seeing place names, and things start to make sense as you've lifted off the blinkers, and you're like, oh, this is what this means, and it's and so the more you learn, it's like you've dug out some old painting, and you're scrubbing it off, and it's starting to take shape, so that's kind of has been the feeling. But the other part of it is actually the humbleness, and especially in those days, I thought I was the big sort of TV guy, and but you go into the wānanga and you'd be at the bottom because you were a poor speaker. You could, and it's a bit frightening because it's not your culture. Are you gonna do the mihi whakatau? Are you gonna start with a tau parapara? What are you gonna do? And you're the little white guy who doesn't. You're at the bottom. And I think that's a pretty good place to be if if you've come from my background. And I think it's one of the treasures of it. Will put yourself into a position where you're not the big man. You're learning from everyone else, and actually maybe you should shut up for a while and listen to other people. And so I found that really useful as well. And that's sort of been another strand of the journey for me. Does that make sense?
Oh no, harder, man. You pronounce those words beautiful, mate. That's awesome. But what's the consensus? Because it's always interesting. You see in social media and of te reo and in English, and then you get this. Then people kind of think, oh, it's quite divisive. Oh no, you shouldn't be speaking te reo. Should be all in Pākehā or what are you kind of gauging in terms of media, in terms of some of those comments or reactions?
Well, on the positive day, which is most days, I think these are just growing pains, and I think, in 2017, and you'd say, e haere aki nei I tēnei hōtaka, coming up on this program. Now, everyone knows what e haere aki nei means, because everyone says it now. And I presume that just goes in. Like back in the day, Nida Glavish said kia ora to a telecom customer. Was it telecom back in the day? Yeah. Telecom, and they crapped themselves and complained, and she was sacked. For saying kia ora. And I still remember when Simon Dallow said kia ora, good evening for the first time on TV. I mean, that's not that long ago. So the more you do it, and the more you're exposed to it, and the more tamariki are learning this stuff, then we're slowly becoming a bilingual country. And there's some old crankers who don't like it. But they'll die away, and our kids will come through. Our kids can't mispronounce stuff. I mean, when I was learning te reo Māori, I had to unlearn all the bastardisation of the words, because we'd have words like taitapu, which we called taitap, and you'd say, I was growing, it was wongaray. And so you had to unlearn that. Our kids won't have to do that. So, because they're living in a different country now. There's some growing pains along the way where, the Don Brashes of the world will say, oh, this is an English-speaking country. And I know this government is trying to do it too, isn't it, and rolling it back. I think it's too late. The genie's out, and it's a beautiful language. And, once the corporates start getting behind it, once you start getting phrases saying like, do the mahi, get the treats, once the corporate world's involved there too, they know where it's at. And that's where the bulk of the population's moving. It's hard to meet a Pākehā person who hasn't been to a Māori language course, Yeah. And so there's a lot of goodwill there, and I think that's a real positive, for us all. And it's disappointing to me for people to make a political statement about it. People used to think that I was left wing because I could speak te reo Māori. What?
Are you serious?
Yeah, they're like, oh, this is a political statement. You're a lefty speaking te reo Māori. It's like, it's not politics, man. It's a language, So I hate it when we shouldn't be politicising something that. Is a culture and and a beautiful language. But I'm pretty optimistic about the future, and I think these are just growing pains along the way.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what would you say? Go on. What would you say to someone, like, if you look down the camera, what would you say to someone who's kind of like, or some of the folks like, oh no, who just can't get over it, or can't deal with te reo, and this is an English speaking nation. What would you say to them in terms of kind of getting them to rethink or shift that kind of mindset?
Kaua e maharahara. Oia tō waka, ko koe he mohi ana ki te mea tika hau mahi mau. You do your own thing, that's good. You know what's best for you, but don't worry about it. I could say a little tiny bit at the top of the program. If you don't understand what it means, it's okay. The other 99% is going to be in English, doesn't matter. So it's going to be all right. It's not an attack on you, and you might even learn something.
Beautiful, man. Say. Beautiful.
That's what I'd say.
Oh, man, mate. You don't even know any other swear words, do you? No, God. But what do you think is so threatening? What do you think some people are calling? Oh no, is it obviously? Is it just because it's just a change, or did they don't like change, or was it? What do you think why is it people are quite resistant?
I think it might be a bit more than that. I think it might be a reminder of a pretty dark past. you know. Because if you don't have another language there, it's easy to sort of forget that this country was founded on a dark past. You can't deny that. I mean, they are facts. You know, land was stolen. You know, culture was suppressed. I mean, no one denies that. That's why we have a reparation process. But if you don't have a language that you hear, then it's probably easier to forget some of that stuff. And I wonder whether some of it is just a reminder of something that, you know, they don't want to think about. So I could be wrong. I might be reading too much into it. I might just be annoyed and cranky, but it might be something a little bit deeper than that. But it's a good question for those people to ask themselves, why am I so annoyed about this? We used to do a little top bit at the top on RNZ, and you do a little mihi at the top, and literally it would have been way less than 1% of the 3-hour program, you know, way less. So why did it worry them so much? Don't know. But I do wonder whether it's, without hearing the language, it's easier to forget some of the dark stuff that happened.
Man, so something to think about, eh? Wow.
And you've mentioned this journey that you've been on and that your daughter's been on in terms of the language. And I'm curious about Guyon Espiner as a father. What are some of the sort of challenges and victories that have come as a result of being a father?
Man, there are challenges, aren't there? Yeah, resting the iPad away is a big challenge. But it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I'm in an interesting position. So me and my wife separated about 18 months ago, 20 months ago. It's all over the internet, so it doesn't matter. You know, that's part of the price you pay. We can talk about any of that if you want to. But when my daughter was born, I was at Morning Report, and I had a really privileged thing. Okay, so I got up at 3:30, which isn't much of a privilege, but I'd be home at 9:30 in the morning, and so I was with her a lot in those early years. And man, no one can take that away from you. You know, that was amazing. We were talking about Zootopia before, great movie. I know all the kids' movies from that era. You know, and I'd be the guy at the trampoline park at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning or whatever it was, and I had absolute ball with her. Those are some of the happiest times of my life. It's, and I'm very, very close with her still, and it's my top priority. But yeah, I'm not perfect at all. Big challenges. It's tough with kids now, isn't it? In the world they're living in and the challenges that they have. So you know, we're all up against that. But yeah, I'm very proud of her and of our relationship.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And do you find, have there ever been challenges, and I imagine it's for a lot of people, but are there ever challenges trying to switch off sort of from work mode and looking into things and then just being like okay with being at the surface and letting things be as they are?
I'm pretty good at that, actually. That's one thing. I'm pretty good at switching off, actually. Yeah. And it doesn't take me too long. If I get to go on a holiday, I'm kind of, half a day and I'm kind of in. And with my daughter, I'm pretty happy to dive into her world. I do try to make her watch the news, and we talk about this stuff. We talk about disinformation. I run a pretty honest policy with her. Some parents are like, "Oh, you shouldn't be talking about stuff like that with her." We dive into big stuff, and she knows how the media works. She knows if it's live or it's pre-recorded. We talk about disinformation and misinformation, and she came home and said, global warming's happening so fast, there's a flower growing in Antarctica. And I said, is that true? And we dug in to see whether it was true, and I saw it on this meme or something, and then we saw BBC, and she knows that BBC is a credible source. So she knows what the credible sources are, and she pulled up this thing and found that it was a fake news thing. And so we went through that as an exercise, like trying to teach her how to, because you can't stop them watching YouTube or whatever it is, because they're always going to be at their mate's place watching TikTok or something. So trying to teach her some media literacy, basically, because I think they should be teaching it in schools, but if they're not going to, then I will.
And you're the perfect person to teach you.
Yeah.
Go on. You mentioned the divorce. I don't know if we're treading on your toes, but Can you just kind of elaborate in terms of the marriage and more so the divorce and how the impact it had on you?
Yeah, pretty profound, really. We were together 10 years or more, married 10 years, and together slightly longer than that, and separated in late 2022. And yeah, wow, that's that's one of the it would be the toughest thing I've ever been through. Yeah, that's it's a pretty profound change, and yeah, it's a grief thing in a way, isn't it? Because you've had a certain life and a certain, you think your future is going to be one way, and then suddenly you have to reinvent yourself. I've been talking about that a bit tonight. So yeah, that has been really challenging, and we've touched on mental health, and I know you guys do a bit in that space. That is a real challenge, and you can see, and I have some friends who've gone down that road and really struggled with it. I think and I hope I've coped pretty well. I probably have been a bit old school about it, in terms I probably could have reached out a bit more to others, and I need to check myself on that. But yeah, it's a very big challenge for people. One of the hardest things I think you can go through. Yeah.
You're not one of those individuals that kind of, obviously, when sometimes you're going through some hardship and struggles, you just kind of throw yourself at work and just find yourself being busy all the time, just to kind of not have those thoughts or think about some of those hardships.
I think there's a bit of that. Yeah, I do a bit of that, probably, to be honest. And the running is it is a good way of coping for me as well. But I've got good friends, and we talk, and that is really, really important, I think, to be able to just know that other people go through similar things, and to be able to share your experiences with them. And I'm glad that I can do that without booze, and without needing to get drunk or anything, and actually just have real conversations with people. I'm really glad that this happened to me, because I like the actual day that we separated, I was thinking, okay, I'm just going to go to the pub and buy a packet of cigarettes as well. So I used to smoke way back in the day, but I went for a run instead. I was that close to drinking again, but I didn't. And because that was my immediate reaction. Oh, that's what you do. Even though I'd been sober for about 3 years at that time, but I didn't look back, and so that's a pretty good test if you can get through something like that without going back. But I'm really glad that I'm in the position that I am, because going down the booze route, something like that's when you're going to get into real trouble, and people do, don't they? That's that is a pretty common thing, and you're only going to make things worse and feel more miserable if you go down that route. So I'm quite glad that I was in a pretty good position when it did, when the rainy day came.
And just thinking on that, because that's such a huge thing to go through. But in a relationship, you tend to lean on your partner to help make up for some of the things. They're one of those key supports. So what's been one of the key things that you've had to kind of figure out on your own as a result of this new phase of life?
I think one of the hardest challenges is being a parent and not having someone else to say, oh, what do you think about this? Or how should we manage this? Or I don't know what happened to a kid might have got caught vaping or got whatever it was. How are we going to deal with this? Or, I think that's one of the harder things is doing that stuff on your own. That's pretty challenging. And so, and again, it just gives you more empathy too, I think, and more understanding about. There's a lot of people who do this, for whatever reason, and often it's women, not always, but who are looking after several kids on their own. That's hard, man. That's really tough, and I think one of the good things when adversity hits you. I'm also a type 1 diabetic, and that was a big change for me. And you go, shit, there are people dealing with, either health conditions or mental health conditions, or their circumstances have fallen, and they've fallen on tough times. And one of the silver linings of having that stuff happen to you is understanding people better and being kinder and being more empathetic to people and understanding people better. Yes, if you've never had anything like that happen to you, it's probably quite hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So I think it can make you a better person. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
No, hard up, Guyon. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's quite very intimate, brother, but man, props to you, man. Sharuzo. Brother, just obviously it would be nice to kind of pick it up a bit in terms of your achievements. And you've done a lot, you've achieved a lot. And so to date, what's been the ultimate achievement for you thus far in terms of your career, in terms of journalist? Or it could be just journalist, or it could be anything else in general.
Yeah, I think making that podcast, The Service, which we did talk about, was one of the highlights for me. That was really cool, and just that whole period of investigative journalism. But then, I love doing all those different things. I probably don't single out any particular one, but I am proud of the journalism I've done. I'm incredibly proud of the daughter I'm raising, and that's I think I've done all right on that so far.
Hard up. You've had a stellar career, brother, in terms of journalism, and obviously your whānau, your family, but also your book. But I haven't even touched on your music, because you're a muso.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far.
You're a muso.
I wouldn't go that far.
You're a guitarist. You're a guitarist.
I'm a better listener than I am player. But I love music. Yeah, I love music. I have since I was a kid. I've played the guitar since I was about 15. Played in some bad rock bands as a late teenager. Dreadful stuff. All the hair bands and stuff. But I love music. I go to gigs quite a lot and just love going to live music. Just great, and I'll go to heaps of different stuff, from indie folk to punk music. I just love live music. I'll go see jazz. I just love watching people play music and singing and stuff. And there's so many good bands in Auckland at the moment, and their skill and just the production is just so much better than it was when we were younger. Like the sound and just the skill level is just, I think, amazing. Yeah, I think New Zealand's music scene is incredible. So I love that. And it's one thing AI can't do, eh? I mean, they can create some crappy music, but you can't, like, going and watching people play music, it's just great. So I love that. And I love doing it so much. So you're actually going and listening to the music. It's just fantastic. So, yeah, music's a big part of my life. And, it makes you feel happier too, eh? Yeah, we touched on mental health a few times. Man, I think music is, music's my church. I'm not a religious person. Music's my church for me, and it is quite spiritual, and I get really uplifted by it. So yeah, that's kind of my thing, and there's something in it, eh? It really does affect mood, doesn't it? It really does. Music's a big part of my life.
Awesome. We got a guitar here, but you don't want to be. Good on you, man.
That's cool. And just thinking, just a tangent on the music buzz. If you had, what's your pick me up song? The song that just gets you going, ready to take on whatever the world has to offer.
Yeah. What would that be? I was listening to Tom Lark today. He's an Auckland musician. He's got a song called Double Happy, I think it was, off his new album, which is really cool. I'm just always listening to new music. I listen to BFM every now and again to pick up new stuff. Sometimes it's the Spotify algorithm that's pushing me in a certain direction. And sometimes it's sad stuff, sort of songs that aren't necessarily pick me up ones, but they can make you feel good. Sometimes soul music or something that fits the mood. Yeah.
Nice. Mate. You're not a vocalist as well, are you? Do you sing as well?
No, you don't want to hear me sing. You really don't.
I got one more question. What does the future hold for you? Like, what do you see yourself in the next 4 to 5 years? Where's Guyon Espiner in the next several years?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I just keep trying to do something new that I can't do that well, So I just next year I'll try and do something new, So I just think to myself, what's something that is just the next one on, Okay, it might be in my area, but something I haven't done before. So I don't know where that's going to be. I've never been a 5-year plan guy ever. I've never mapped stuff out ever in my life. And maybe that's not a good thing, but that's the way I've always rolled. I've always been just like, find something and then just passionately go for it, and then look up every now and again and think, no, shit, this is getting a bit boring. People will be sick of me soon. Better go and find the next thing. And, it's worked for me so far. It's not a great strategy, but it's kind of worked for me so far. So I couldn't tell you, mate. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years' time. Maybe you can come back and we can see how it's gone. I can come back and
for sure. Hard out, Guyon. We need to give a part 2, man.
Come and hold me to it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome, mate. Hey.
Test me how many of my predictions have come true.
You never know. You're not getting into politics, are you?
Yeah, no. I'd actually enjoy it, but I'd have to join a party and I hate all of them equally. So yeah, I'd actually quite like to give it a crack, but you'd have to join a party and
That's where you start your own party, Guyon.
Oh yeah, no one wants that. No one wants the Guyon Espiner party.
Brother, it's been absolute pleasure. What an awesome night in terms of just listening to you, but even having you on at the table, Guyon. It's just having you live, seeing you live, and having a chat with you. And it's been awesome, man, brother. And just your passion, it really exudes and it really comes across real strong. Your passion. Obviously, you've achieved a lot of things in your life and in your career. And so, brother, for me, all the best in 2024 with whatever goals are there. Obviously, you got 30 with yourself, and so I hope that it just kind of skyrockets and becomes successful and just does really well.
Hey, that's awesome, and thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really cool, actually. I've had a pretty good time here. And thanks for your generosity and your questions. You've actually stumped me a few times, which is pretty cool. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you for having me here and for being interested and just having a really good kōrero over the last hour or so. It's been really cool. Yeah, so thank you for having me here.
You're welcome.
I've really enjoyed it.
It's not done yet because I think Jay's got another 12 questions.
He's been writing them down. It's more than 12.
I've got such a bad memory. I have to write down my thoughts, otherwise it just goes. Right. Again, just like Pete was saying, it's been a real pleasure and so informative. And I love even just the way that you present information. Like, it's so digestible for myself, who's not generally tapped into the way the world works. And so, we've talked about reinvention, trust and lifting the curtain. And it's been cool to see that although we talked about some of the things in journalism, there was actually some real cool cross connections with the way that you operate as a father and your relationship with your daughter. And so my very last question was, and because when I think of these episodes, to me, they're like time capsules. Like, they'll live on and we'll be able to watch these back and refer to them and learn from them. And I always think, especially as fathers, like I'm really grateful and privileged that I get to be on here to learn from people like yourself, to ask questions, and in some ways be selfish a little bit because I pull that into my role as a father, as a teacher, as a husband. And so my last question essentially is just, what would be a message to your future self and to your daughter, a learning or a piece of advice or just a message from the heart to your future self, your future daughter, that would, benefit them in some way?
Yeah. you know, I think about this a bit, and people will say, "Oh, what would you like your daughter to be, and what would you, you know, do you want her to be a lawyer or a doctor or something fine?" And I just say, and I say that to her too. I want you to be someone I would like to know, and that to me is the pinnacle, being a good human being. I don't mind in the end if you're you know, doing an ordinary job, or you're a ballerina or a rock star or whatever. I want you to be someone I would like to know, and that's my aspiration, to be a really good human being. You know, that's it for me. And I don't mean that to be like, oh, I don't want her to take on the world. It'd be cool if she does, and I want to prepare her for that. But being a good human is top for me.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you.
Man, props to you. I'm going, because every guest that comes on, and I think it's just been just a diverse guest and a different mix of people coming on, and men and women, our wahine. And you just add to it. You're just adding value to not only to us, but also to the men and the viewers and the listeners, and in general the people who are listening. So, props to you. So, thank you very much. And we always give our guests a gift. And so we always do a caricature or a cartoon of how we envision our guest. And so this, on behalf of the Mandate team, this is for you, brother.
Look at that. That's awesome.
Oh, mate.
Who drew that?
That's Pete.
That's awesome, man.
I appreciate it, mate.
That is so cool. Look at that. It's great.
Mate. No, thank you. No, thank you. Thank you for your time, brother. Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Oh, that's so cool.
I appreciate it, Guyon. And so, Guyon,
I think I won out of this deal.
hey,
you guys had to listen to me for hours. I get to take this.
No, we appreciate it. It was
so
a
cool.
great korero. But brother, is anyone? Can you think of anyone who would be ideal or perfect to come on the podcast? You're like, oh, you should have this person. This person would be great. Is there anyone?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about. I think Mark Sainsbury is a really good yarn. He's a really, really interesting guy, and such a generous man, and really interested in men's health. I reckon you should talk to Mark.
Oh, mate, it would be great to have him on.
Tell him not to tell any bad stories about me, though. He's got.
Oh, it'd be good to have Mark Sainsbury. Yeah, awesome, man. Yeah. And so we always give our guests the last word. Any words of encouragement for our viewers and our listeners? Guyon.
Oh, I just think that do what we did today, eh? Like, talk about stuff, be open about stuff, ask awkward questions, you know, and try and find some common ground. I think what we did today is what people should be doing all the time, you know, listening to each other, listening closely, even if it's ideas that you don't necessarily agree with, or a different path that you would have taken. I think in a way what we've done tonight is what men should be doing, eh? Like talking and being open, addressing difficult stuff, working it through, learning from each other, you know, across cultures or ages, you know, differences. I think we're too keen to see the differences now, if we can find the eloquence around the commonalities, you know, that's the sharp bit, eh? And so that's what that would be my advice.
Oh, awesome, man. Well said. Appreciate that. Please, we look forward to your thorough comments, but also please don't forget to subscribe. And so thank you once again, Guyon. Appreciate your time once again in the korero. And as usual, Javen.
Refine,
unlock,
and take charge.
Mandate.